Donald Trump is running the no accountability administration. If you leak war plans, he doesn't care. Move on. If you cause a measles outbreak, he doesn't care. Move on. And when he crashes the economy, he doesn't care. He moves on. He won't take accountability. He won't deal with the blame. But even worse than that, he tries to shift the blame, which is exactly what we saw in a ridiculous temper tantrum this morning in a cabinet meeting in which he just lost his mind. We're going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, before we can get into Donald Trump's meltdown, we have to get the context for why he's so upset, and we're going to get that from Chris Hayes right here.
It's really striking the degree to which this is not a person who believes, even in principle, in free markets. He doesn't like free markets. He basically wants a planned economy controlled by him. That's how he describes the economy. That means he's allowed to run the country like a kind of corrupt mafia state, right? Where he shakes down big companies, he views his adversaries, he cuts sweetheart deals to his friends. His own Commerce Secretary effectively agreed that even talking about the tariffs is an attack on the White House.
If a company were to say we're raising prices because of the tariff, is that a hostile act?
I think if you go out of your way to try to make it seem like your price has changed when it's nonsense, okay? A 10% tariff.
Why is that nonsense?
Because a 10% tariff is not going to change virtually any price. The only price it would change would be a product that we don't make here, like a mango.
Wait, what? First of all, people will absolutely notice that prices rise by 10%. Second, it's not just 10% from China, right? It's 10% for everyone. We're still waiting on all the other tariffs, which are postponed. But from China, it's 145%. I think people will notice that. That aside, Jeff Bezos gets how the administration's operating, so he's not going to tell you about the Trump tax directly. But again, this is really key. Listen to this. It's still going to cost 145% more to import things from China, whether or not Amazon explicitly tells you what is happening. It's exactly the same thing Trump tried to do back during COVID, remember? Where he just hated all the testing and he tried to keep the testing numbers artificially low so that there would be fewer reported cases. But again, this is just so crucial. That didn't actually mean fewer cases. It didn't mean less virus spreading. It was still spreading. People still noticed when they got sick and when loved ones died.
Chris Hayes is making the most important point. As much as Donald Trump wants to whine and complain and say he is the greatest president ever, as much as he will attempt to cover up for a recession that is coming, prices that are higher, a stock market that continues to tumble, we will all soon feel the effects if we're not already feeling them. People see it in their 401ks. They're about to see empty shelves. Even if Amazon takes the import prices off, like Jeff Bezos has promised and Chris Hayes said, prices will still be higher. And even Donald Trump seems to understand the impact that he's having because he talked about it right here before he melted down.
I just saw some reports coming out, and I don't want that to happen to China. I like the president a lot, President Xi. I don't want it to happen. I was actually saddened to hear it, but they are getting absolutely hammered in China. And, you know, they're sending boats, the biggest boats in the world, carrying cargo like nobody's ever seen before. These are the biggest boats in the world, biggest cargo ships in the world, and they're coming and they're turning around in the Pacific Ocean. They're doing a big U-turn and going back because they don't want the goods because 145% tariff. But at a certain point, I hope we're going to make a deal with China. We're talking to China, but their factories are closing all over China because we're not taking their product. We don't want their product unless they're going to be fair with us. And that includes intellectual property and other things. There are a lot of things far beyond just buy, sell. So
I know Donald Trump sees this as a huge win, that there are shipping containers turning around, that huge ships filled with American products are not going over to China. He sees it as, you know, China being scared. They don't want to pay our tariffs. But that's not the case. It's not China wanting to not pay our tariffs on American goods. China's imposed their own tariffs, Donald, and it's hurting American businesses shipping products to China. We saw this in 2019 with Donald Trump's first stupid trade war. The economic impact is already here, even though Donald Trump is clearly trying to cover that up with this meltdown right here.
the basis under which we won the election. Core GDP, and this is, you probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this is quarterly numbers, and we came in and I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our country in so many ways, not only at the border was more obvious, but we took over his mess in so many different ways. Core GDP, removing distortions from imports, inventories, and government spending, was up plus 3% when you add it. We had numbers that despite what we were handed, we turned them around, and we were getting them really turned around. Gross domestic investment was a whopping 22%. Now, that is a number that people are coming in at numbers. For instance, I just walked in.
Donald Trump is now blaming Joe Biden for the recession he is causing. And there's a small bit of truth in what Donald Trump said there, not about blaming Joe Biden, but saying that these GDP projections are a summation of the whole quarter, that they started in January. Well, do you know what else started in January? Companies letting people go, hoarding cash, predicting that a recession was coming, because even before Donald Trump was president, his talk of tariffs started to spook the job market. Donald Trump has caused these problems not just in office, but even before. So when he wants to blame President Biden, no, it is Donald Trump's pre-presidency that also contributed to this economic downturn. Things have been so bad that even the anticipation of Donald Trump has caused these problems in the market. And we saw Donald Trump this morning say that this is still Joe Biden's stock market, which runs counter to what he said on January 29th, praising the Trump effect for seeing a little bubble pop up in the stock market. So which is it, Donald? Is it that this is never going to be your economy? Is it always been Joe Biden's? When will you take credit? When will you shift the blame? There is no truth. There is no through line here. It is all just nonsensical. And speaking of nonsensical, listen to Howard Lutnick right here.
Paying for my dinner. The External Revenue Service, right? You've got the tariffs and the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars coming in to build the External Revenue Service. That our objective, of course, is to replace the Internal Revenue Service and let those outside countries trading with us, let them pay their fair share to America.
All of the talks around the money that we were going to bring in from tariffs have fallen pretty flat, pretty quick. Howard Lutnick is saying that we're bringing in hundreds of billions of dollars. We're going to bring in hundreds of billions. Well, that's not true. The wild projections that Donald Trump made for his tariffs, thinking that billions were going to be coming in daily, it's not even close. It's not even half that. The amount of imports coming in has dropped so significantly that any projections Donald Trump had, or his administration, Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick had, they're nowhere close. But also, let's return to this point. If the tariffs are just leverage, then there is not an actual cogent plan of an external revenue service. If you want to make a deal with China, you're not going to be bringing in money from tariffs on China if you're getting rid of the tariffs. There is no thought to any of this. And also, I just have to point out, we started by talking about Amazon. Howard Lutnick is talking about the money that the United States is and will bring in because of import charges. That is what Amazon was listing, the import cost, which Howard Lutnick is talking about as being huge and making America a lot of money. So which is it? These people have so much cognitive dissonance and completely misunderstand what they're saying. They are moronic. They do not know what they're talking about. The math is not mathing, which is exactly what Congresswoman Stansbury had to say about Donald Trump's tax cuts for billionaires in this takedown right here.
Ms. Stansbury.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think these markups are complicated and sometimes difficult to explain and understand because they get into technical details. So I want to try to break it down a little bit and actually with our current acting ranking member, maybe get a little bit into the details. So let me zoom way out here to talk about the entire enterprise that the GOP is engaged in right now and to lay down some facts. So first of all, what's important to understand is that over the last couple of months, the president has transmitted to the Hill a list of asks. And they really focus on making permanent tax breaks that were originally put into place in 2017 that are about to sunset. So these tax breaks are for billionaires, millionaires, mega corporations, and it's going to cost $7 trillion. And to pay for it, they want to try to offset some of those costs because our friends across the aisle are trying to claim that they're being fiscally responsible. But let's be clear, the math doesn't math, because the offsets that they're seeking only add up to about $1.5 to $2 trillion. So if you do the math, 7 minus 2 equals 5, which is why this bill, the big bill that we're talking about, does not actually reduce the debt or the deficit. It actually will blow a hole through it by increasing debt spending by $5 trillion. And when you add it all up over 30 years, we're talking over $30 trillion in new spending for the United States government. So first of all, don't buy the baloney that this is somehow going to balance the debt. This is going to blow a giant hole in the debt. Now, let's talk about what is happening in this committee. So they passed the instructions out of the Senate, came back to the House. Very confusing. The Senate and the House Republicans couldn't agree on which package to go with, so they passed it all. So here we are now. Those instructions have gone down to each committee, and each committee now has to break it down in its own jurisdiction. So this committee can only work on things that are in its jurisdiction. We're in the Oversight Committee. Our jurisdiction is overseeing the federal government. And so this committee has been instructed through those resolution instructions to cut funding to supposedly offset cuts. So where are they trying to find those cuts? They're trying to find those cuts on our federal workers' backs. Now, let's be clear. Over the last 100 days, Donald Trump has fired over 200,000 probationary employees. Over 75,000 people have been forced to retire or leave the federal government. And now they're talking about taking away significant retirement benefits and turning the federal workforce over to an at-will workforce. What that means is that they want to strip away the protections for our federal workers so they can be fired at will at any moment. Okay, so that is actually what is inside this reconciliation piece that's in front of the committee today. And if you do not, as a federal employee, elect to be at will, if this passes, if this piece of legislation passes, you're going to have your retirement taxed, essentially.
It is no surprise that the political party that wants to ban books doesn't know how math works. That is not a shock. That shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, but it is certainly something we need to call out, which we are going to on this show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around at the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.